Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video of Wild Rift. So we're back with episode 9 of Wild Rift Fundamentals. And today we'll be discussing how to build a champion pool. So now, as usual, Wild Rift Fundamentals is generally a series for beginners or people who are newer at the game or at lower ranks to, of course, help out the newer players in these sort of basic facets of the game. So today we're going to be discussing how to build a champion pool. And what is a champion pool? Basically, a champion pool is the champions that you can play confidently to a high level. So champion pool consists of all of these champions that you can play competently, confidently, and just you're really good at, basically. So, personally, I am an ADC main, and I started playing the game on the first week of release, on the third or fourth day when the game released. So I've been playing for about 1.5 years now, and I'm gonna be using myself as an example when I talk about champion pools. So of course, this is in the aspect of an ADC main, but of course this applies to mid lane and jungle, top lane, or support. Basically, it applies to all roles is what I'm trying to say. Not sure why I went about such a long-winded way of saying that, but basically it applies to all roles. Just substitute my champions with champions in your role. So, now, the first step to building a champion pool, of course, is to start with a single champion. So, you gotta start, when you start building a house, you gotta start with the first brick. So first up, you want to start off with your first champion. Now, of course, choosing what champion to main or choosing what champion to pick is a completely different topic altogether. So once you've decided on what role you want to play, now we have a guide on which role to play and the pros and cons of each role in the Wild Rift Fundamental series. So check that out if you haven't. When you've chosen your role, when you've chosen a champion for that role, you can start building your champion pool from the first champion. So the very first step, pretty obviously, is to of course start off with a single champion. So for me personally, that was Jhin. Jhin was the first ever champion that I played in Wild Rift, and this is an important part of the first step, which is to play that champion to Mastery 5 before starting off playing any other champion. Now there is a good reason why I'm saying this, and this is mostly toward beginners. Now if you're trying to build a champion pool and you're in like a higher rank, let's say you're in like Plat or Emerald for some reason, and you're still trying to build a champion pool. Now, I have no idea why that would be the case. Maybe you decide to swap roles or something like that, but mostly this is focused on people who just started playing the game. So now the reason why you want to focus only on one champion at the very beginning is because firstly, you're completely new to the game. So aside from learning your champion, you have to also learn a lot of other aspects of the game, like for example, vision, map awareness, rotations, contesting objectives, laning, what enemy champions do to you, etc, etc. Many aspects of the game to learn. So you want to only be playing one champion so that you can focus on learning all the other aspects of the game and not complete and end your champion at the same time. But you have to focus a little bit less on your champion because you're playing the same champion every single game. So you have to keep thinking about what does my champion do, which stage of the game am I strong at for this champion compared to that champion. So you want to start off with only one champion and get it to Mastery 5. Now as you're on your journey to getting it to Mastery 5, you should be learning about other aspects of the game, which I all just mentioned previously. So you take the time to learn all the other facets of the game, where to ward, etc, that sort of thing, and at the same time learn that one champion. So as I said, for me, that was Jhin. As I was learning the game, I was learning how to play Jhin as well, because Jhin is my favorite champion. Even today, it is still my favorite champion. So now, the reason why I talk about Mastery and getting to Mastery 5 is in Wild Rift, it takes quite a number of games to get a champion in Mastery 5. If you only play PvP, it's going to take hundreds upon hundreds of games. So you got to play it in Ranked. And unless you're the kind of player who doesn't play Ranked at all, then of course go ahead and play it in PvP. Maybe don't have to get to Mastery 5, but by and large, for a majority of people who play Ranked, play it in Ranked and play it up till Mastery 5, because when you get like an S rating or A rating, you get a couple hundred Mastery points, which will bring you there a lot faster compared to PvP, where at most I think you can get 20 to 30 Mastery points, which is going to take a long while to get it to Mastery 5. So get that champion to Mastery 5. After you get to Mastery 5, you can consider the next step, which I'm going to describe. So the next step, oh, actually before we move on to the next step, I'm going to discuss a general topic that's going to apply to every champion you learn throughout this video, which is whether to learn a champion in PvP or ranked. Now, learning a champion in PvP versus learning a champion in ranked is pretty different, and I will say that the answer to whether you should learn a champion in PvP or ranked depends on your rank. Now, if you're just starting out the game, maybe you want to play a bit of PvP to just get an overall feel of the game. I don't believe ranked is unlocked at the very start anyway, but you maybe want to play a bit of PvP to get a feel for the game. And when you're confident enough, jump straight into rank and start learning the champion that you're already learning halfway in PvP. Start learning it in ranked. And if you're like at a rank that's below, that's like plat or below, maybe like gold, silver, bronze, maybe even plat itself, I do believe you can learn a champion in rank, because at these ranks like gold and below, champion mastery is not going to be the main factor about whether you win and lose games. It's normally going to be things like rotations, objectives, and overall macro that's going to be a lot more important than what champion you're actually playing. Now, of course, if you're playing a very mechanically difficult champion, like let's say you're playing a Yasuo or something, I'm not too sure you might want to start learning Yasuo in platinum rank, but you could still do that if you want to. Of course, no one can really stop you, but I think maybe playing in PvP might be a little bit more advantageous for you. And as you rise up the ranks, let's say you're in Emerald, you're in Diamond, like Emerald and above, basically, I don't recommend learning champions in ranked anymore. I recommend going to PvP and playing like at least 20 games of PvP on that champion to get a feel for that champion, that there are power spikes in terms of levels, in terms of items, etc. To get a good feel for the champion before you take that champion into ranked. So this is going to apply to every single champion that you go for. Basically, it just depends on what rank you are, whether you want to learn the champion in ranked or in PvP. So now the next step is to learn another 2 more champions in your main role and get them to Mastery 5 as well. So now those 2 champions for me when I first started out the game was the second champion I learned was Kai'Sa. So after I learned Kai'Sa, I learned Miss Fortune. Now, these 2 champions, you don't have to get Kai'Sa to Mastery 5, then you get Miss Fortune to Mastery 5. You can learn these 2 champions like simultaneously while mixing in a little bit of that champion you already got to Mastery 5. But try to focus on one more than the other. So for example, after I got Jhin to Mastery 5, I started learning Kai'Sa. I learned Kai'Sa at least to pass Mastery 3, maybe like Mastery 4, before I even started to start learning Miss Fortune. But of course, learning champions simultaneously is gonna help you in the sense that you're gonna increase your champion pool faster. But of course, if you can't handle it, stick to one champion, learn that one champion, then move on to the next one. But if you can learn 2 champions at one go. So basically, at the end of step 2, you should have 3 champions you can play in your main role at Mastery 5. So for me, that's Jhin, Kai'Sa, and MF. Now, building a champion pool is not something that happens overnight. It's not something that happens in a month or 2. You're going to take a long time to build up a champion pool, like a couple of months probably. Depends on how often you play, of course. But it's going to take quite a number of games to build up your champion pool. So now step 3 is something that you can sort of do simultaneously with step 1 and 2, because the step 3 is to learn a champion in another role. So, of course, you're not always going to get your main role. Sometimes you get auto-filled to a second role, so you basically have to have a champion you can play in another role. So for me, when I started out the game, I queued Baron Lane as my second position. As soon as positional queue was out, like the game back in the day didn't even have positional queue. You had to sort of beg for your role. But anyways, my secondary role was Baron Lane, and the champion that you pick for your secondary role shouldn't be a very mechanically difficult champion. Like, if, for example, I'm an ADC main, my second champion shouldn't be something like a Camille or a Fiora or like a Yasuo or something like that. You shouldn't pick something that's too complicated, because it's not really a main role. If you want to, you can, of course, but for me, I picked basically the simplest champion I could find, which was Malphite. So I started learning Malphite in the Baron lane. Now, the reason why I picked Malphite because he was simple and he had huge teamfight impact. So, as I say, you can pick whatever champion you want, but try picking an easier champion for your secondary role, because it's not as important to have a mechanically difficult champion or a very strong carry kind of champion in your secondary role. Not always, at least. So for me, that was Malphite. I started learning Malphite in my secondary role, and then you want to learn a champion in a tertiary role as well. So you're not always going to get your first or second choice. Generally in ranked, you're going to get only up to 3, your third, choice. So for my third choice, I have mid lane. So mid lane, I start learning Orianna. So steps 2 and 3, it's sort of like situational when you get auto-filled into your secondary or tertiary role. You don't have a choice. You can't be learning like an ADC in the mid or an ADC in the top. So you sort of have to adapt the situation and just start your learning journey on one of those other champions. So for me, those two champions was Malphite in top and Orianna in mid. So I started learning Orianna in mid, I started learning Malphite in top, and whenever I got auto-filled to those roles, I play those champions. And these are champions you don't have to care too much about mastery. It's just you want to feel comfortable on those champions and get auto-filled. So for me, on Orianna and Malphite, I don't even think I'm at Mastery 4. Let's not even discuss Mastery 5, but I don't even think I'm at Mastery 4. I might be at Mastery 4, but I'm definitely not at Mastery 5. So mastery on these champions don't actually really matter, at least to me. You just want to be comfortable on playing these champions in case you get auto-filled, so you don't feel like a fish out of water, like you can't play any champions in that role. You just want to be comfortable. So however many games it takes for you to feel comfortable, that's on you. That's up to you how many games you want to feel comfortable with the champion. But yeah, basically just have to have a champion that you can play on two other roles. So your next step is to expand your champion pool for your main role. So now you can do this, by this time you might be in the high rank, you can do this by going to PvP, or you can still do this in ranked if you feel confident enough. Of course, you at least try out the champion in practice too first. Don't just first time a champion in rank without even knowing what the champion does, without even knowing their build. Don't do that. That makes the game bad for everybody. But yeah, so you can start expanding your champion pool into like as many more champions as you want. So for me, the next couple of champions I learned in ADC was Xayah, Ezreal, and Draven. So those are the next 3 champions that I start playing in the ADC role. Of course, not all 3 simultaneously, but basically, the moment you have your core 3 champions that you learned, in my case is Jhin, Kai'Sa, and Miss Fortune, you can sort of start weaving in other champions while also having being able to fall back on your original 3 champions. And then eventually, you can expand the champion pool of your main role to as large as you want. So for me, I can play literally every single ADC there is in the game, except maybe Ashe and Senna. I'm not too confident in, but every single other ADC other than Ashe and Senna, I can play at a high level. I can play at a diamond level. I play all ADCs in diamond, except Ashe and Senna, which I don't think I can play at a diamond level, but the rest I can indeed do that. So then you move on to the next step, which is after you have X number of champions for your main role, however many you feel comfortable with that you want, you can move on to learning 2 champions in each of the other roles. So for me, I already have Orianna, I already have Malphite for top and mid. Then I went for a jungle pick. I went with Graves because Graves is very similar to ADCs in the sense that he's a jungle marksman. So I went with Graves, and then I learned one support, which in my case was Janna, because firstly Janna was given for free, and secondly Janna I think is a really good support. So I had like one champion for every role. As I said, don't have to be Mastery 5, don't even have to be Mastery 4. You just need to be comfortable enough in playing it in that role. Then you want to have another champion in all of those roles, just in case that champion gets picked or banned, so you have a backup. So for me, jungle, I started learning Kha'Zix. I learned Corki, as an ADC player, and I can play Corki in mid as well, so that was sort of like an overlap, which is always good. Like if you have champions you can play in multiple roles, like for example like Riven, you can play in jungle and you can play in top. A lot of jungle champions can be played in some other in like mid or top as well, but ADC is a little bit more specific, so I didn't really have that for me. But if you main a certain role, sometimes you can get lucky and the champions can overlap a little bit. But yeah, so after I got Corki, I went for like Garen top and Seraphine support. Now basically, if you notice the trend here, majority of the champions I picked for my secondary, tertiary onward roles are all pretty simple champions. Like, look at Garen, look at, look at Malphite. They aren't too difficult. Maybe Kha'Zix is a little bit more difficult because he has an assassin playstyle, which is pretty different from the rest of my champion pool. But slowly you expand your champion pool. And of course, in your main role, you want to have high mastery champions. You want to be really good at the champions in your main role. But you also want to have, fallback champions on all of the other roles, just in case you you need it. So basically over time, as you slowly build up your entire champion pool, you'll slowly realize you have like a champion ocean. Hopefully by a certain point in time. Of course, if you're the kind who likes to only play 3 champions or what in their main role and don't want to learn like 10 champions in their main role like me, there's no issue with that as well. You know, to each his own. Whatever kind of champion pool you want to build, that's up to you. You don't want to learn a champion in your 4th and 5th role, yeah, why you know, just go for it. Just have a champion in your secondary and tertiary role, so why not? So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility when coming to building the champion pool. But anyways, guys, as you can see, we have reached the end of the discussion or tutorial on building a champion pool, and we've also reached the end of the gameplay. So I'll leave you guys with the stats as usual. So thank you guys for watching the video, and goodbye.